Good morning, everybody. Good morning. What a great crowd. Welcome all of you to our new series of Sunday forums after Easter. It's great to be with all of you. Happy Easter, one and all. John Roars, the rector here, and I, in just a moment, will introduce our speakers for this morning, or hand it over to Bill to do so. But I wanted to welcome all of you. This new series after Easter, which will run 5 weeks, is focused on finding new life and finding the life of the resurrection in the midst of our lives. We have, what you'll hear are stories of challenge, actually, in many of these weeks ahead. Next week, we have a focus on mental health and wellness. The week after that, on addiction and recovery. The week after that on death and dying, kind of preparing for death, which may sound incongruous with the season of Easter, but the thought is, how do we find the resurrection in the midst of life, in the midst of real life? How do we find the resurrection and hope, Easter hope, through the challenges of our lives? And I think you will hear something of that story this morning. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill Sachs, and he's going to introduce our special guest this morning.
Good morning. It's my great delight to see all of you and to introduce all of you to a very esteemed friend and colleague, Tim Hightower. Welcome to St. Stephen's, and so glad to have you this morning. This morning we're really telling the story that is Tim's story of his rise to the National Football League, and then in his fourth year an injury that kept him out of football for 4 years, and then his return to the National Football League, and time permitting, a glimpse at what lies ahead for him now. There's several subplots, and one of the subplots is just how this book came to be. And indeed, it is the book that is for sale on the table outside this room. So just slide that in. So, but it is, I dare to say, a remarkable friendship, a remarkable story, and a remarkable book. And it really is the story of Tim's dream, and then recovery and learning and daring to dream again. So what we're going to do is begin with a 2-minute, 57-second video that really summarizes the story, and then we'll unpack it for you.
What is it that drives you? I remember telling my mom in the 5th grade that I was going to play professional football. I wrote it down on a sheet of paper, I put it in my pocket, and I would take it with me everywhere I went. And I remember just taking that sheet of paper out and looking at these goals and just visualizing myself run up and down the football field, scoring touchdowns, fans cheering. I became obsessed with this goal and this dream.
When I was your age, well, you know what I thought? I thought if I make the NFL one day, I make a lot of money, all my problems are gonna go away, because people with money don't have any problems. Who said that's not true?
I remember riding in the car, my mother asked, why was I doing what I was doing? And I didn't really have an answer for it. And I remember her telling me, son, have a purpose behind everything that you do. Because if you have a purpose and you know why you're doing what you do, you'll be successful, you'll be determined, and nothing can stop a man with purpose. There's some times in life where you can't see past where you currently are. And I remember in those times, whether it was when I was young, whether it was when I was in college, I would close my eyes, take out my sheet of paper, and just envision myself being where I wanted to be. Getting drafted was a dream come true. And then getting a chance that first year to play in the Super Bowl, what I had envisioned since I was a little kid. And at that point, I thought my purpose was to get to the NFL, make a lot of money, and I'd be set forever. I didn't know what would come.
They go back to Hightower. He is in pain. And you see the left knee go out. He's already hopping up on it, grabbing it. And the crowd here applauding.
So what do you do now? And you're being told that you may never play football again. What do you do when everything that you prepared for is gone? It flashes in front of you. What do? I remember sitting in that hospital bed, just tears flooding my eyes. And I remember thinking about the conversation my mother telling me, nothing can stop a man with purpose. Son, be purpose-driven. So after I wiped my tears, I closed my eyes, I took out a pen, and I began to write.
I knew I must redefine my purpose. My life was different. Things changed, but the process was the same. I made a promise to myself that not only would I come back stronger, but that I would use my experiences, my story, to impact the lives of many and to challenge others to never give up, to find their purpose.
As the screen goes up and the lights are about to come on, I neglected to introduce Tim's family, including Ricky Hightower and their children, and Tim's dad, Louis Hightower. Welcome to St. Stephen's. Good to have you.
Is this on?
Is it on?
Good morning. Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, thank you for everyone in attendance. And I know there are some who will join us live stream. Bill, you know how to bring a crowd, man. Yeah, I may just have to bring you on the road, man, if I would have known, right? No, seriously, thank you all for being here. I want to echo that, and I would argue a little bit. That's my responsibility to introduce. You know, I got them. All right. But thank you all. I do want to start with a few thank yous because there were times when I was sitting on that hospital bed where the only thing that got me through to the next day was thinking of these days, of thinking of standing in front of my family, kids, communities, people. It was something to hold on to, and so I am thankful to stand here because it wasn't guaranteed that I would be standing here with a story to tell. So I'm thankful. So with that being said, I will start with my family. Probably the most, so many people want to hear about, hey, Dad, sorry to call you out, but good to see you. So many people ask often about the football experiences. Who hit the hardest, right? Who was the toughest team, the toughest environment? My perspective has changed drastically since having a family. It is probably the most rewarding and challenging experience of my life, right? But I'm thankful for them. They've taught me so much. They've challenged me and stretched me to grow. So thank you all, starting with the patriarch, Mr. Hightower. I'll talk about him a little bit in a bit, but thank you all for being here. I'm a true believer that it takes a village, right? And part of my village has been consistent since high school is Alita Richards. Thank you. You have been a rock. You have been a foundation. You've been an anchor, a support system. You and Bill consistently throughout the years. So thank you. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, this guy right here, man. We'll talk about it in a little bit. We have a very transparent. I love our relationship and friendship. Many 5:30 a.m.s, 6 o'clock meetings. You know, Bill said, "What time are we meeting to write?" I said, "Well, 5 o'clock." Okay, all right. But many conversations. We've gotten to know each other very well, and thank you. I appreciate the time that we've had, and thank you to this church for what you do, not just in this community, but I'm aware of the impact. I'm aware of the commitment, the work that you do in other communities. It's important. The first thing that my father and my parents, I didn't understand it when I was a kid. The first thing they always challenged us, no matter where we went, was to find a church home. So I had like this bittersweet relationship with church growing up. Because as a young kid, my parents stayed in the church. They were in the church often. They were full of faith, but we struggled. And I couldn't understand that. And I'm thinking, why, if this whole church God thing is supposed to work, why are we why does life seem so hard for us? But from the first basketball team that I played on, the Raymond Crusaders in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it was church. From the activities, the mentors, the friends, it all started in church. So I'm thankful for this church, and I will encourage and challenge. This church represents more than just a building where people gather on Sundays. There are lives that are being developed there are lives waiting to be developed and impacted. And this church and the members in this church serve as that foundation. So thank you for the work that you do. Without further ado, because you all came to hear about this book, why in the world, the first thing I'll start with, and there are three things that we talked about wanting to accomplish today. The first thing is I want to share my story. And I know that seems so commonplace, and yeah, of course. But the more I learned about stories and the power of sharing stories, right? In Matthew 13, that the disciples asked Jesus, "Why do you always speak in parables?" And Jesus didn't have the Harvard Business Review. He didn't have any of these articles and journals that we reference. But he knew the power of speaking in parables and sharing stories. Before they ever studied it, he knew that close to 70% of our conversations are about what? Through what? Stories. Through stories. He knew that we only remember 5% of the statistics that we hear, but 70%, nearly 70% of the stories. Long before Apple and Microsoft and Amazon and Google knew that that 70% of their consumers would prefer story, mission-driven brands, he knew the power of a story and its ability to connect, to connect us across socioeconomic lines, gender, ethnicities. He knew the power of story. So I want to share my story today. Because maybe there's somebody in here at some point, maybe you never played sports, maybe you don't like sports. But maybe there's something about one of these, the evolution of this kid into this now man who's trying to figure out what it means to be a husband, father, community leader, businessman, all these other things. Maybe there's something in my story, in your personal story, that you can relate, understand, and challenge you to maybe think twice, and ultimately start to share your stories. That's the first thing we can do. We'll talk about the story, right? The second thing, I want to share some of the principles in those stories, right? There's some things, someone once told me that it's not necessarily about the journey, the destination, it's about the journey. My pastor taught me that success leaves clues. You see, growing up, I didn't understand. I had never seen anyone who was, quote unquote, successful by the standards that I was looking for. I didn't see anyone in my community. Now, maybe many of you don't have that. Maybe you do have that story. But I needed to see it. I knew I wanted to be a 49er when I grew up, but I needed to be it. If I could just get to Candlestick Park and just see it. It's amazing when you stretch a kid's mind and you give them vision. But I didn't have that. So I was encouraged to study the success of others. And you find the clues, the breadcrumbs. And you study success. Young kids in here, if you want to achieve any level of success, you find individuals who have done it. You find a good coach, and you find others who have done it, and you study them. You replicate it. So I want to share some of those breadcrumb moments for me and those aha moments for me. Then lastly, I'd like to connect and hear, and this will lead into the why. I was reluctant to write a book about football because my life has been, while football has taught me a lot, my life has been so much more than football. But what I learned, and as we discuss in this book, from my time in football, and more importantly, my time away from football, that there were so many relatable experiences in that journey. And I wanted to understand how my experiences connected me for my life's work ahead to others and their stories and their journeys. So in order to do that, I need a little bit of class participation at the end. Does that work? Okay. You ready? Come on, let's do it, man. All right. So one of the questions, I want to start with a little FAQ. We know what those are, FAQs. Any of you ever went to a company website you're trying to figure out how to work this new technology, and you go to the FAQ section, frequently asked questions, I figured I'd go ahead and get that out of the way right now. Can we do that? Can we do that? All right, cool. Look, the church I grew up in, they talk back, right? They talk back. All right? So I'm not used to it being quiet. You guys got to talk to me a little bit. Okay. So one of the questions that I often receive, why in the world did you write a book? Why? That was I didn't want to write a book. I felt like I hadn't accomplished what I set out to accomplish. I wanted to write a book, but I thought that would take place when I was, 50, 60, in retrospect, right? From a position of success. So I didn't want to write a book. But the more I interacted with non-football, real life people, and I found out that 5% there are 5 major events that will happen, traumatic events that affect and impact the course of our lives, right? Maybe some of you, again, have experienced some of this and you can relate. Death of a loved one, major illness, loss of a career, divorce, a major move. I had experienced all that in the span of a year to 2 years. At 25 years old, I went from starting an NFL running back on the verge and negotiating a multi-million-dollar contract to experiencing all 5 major traumatic life events. That, needless to say, that impacted my life. Yeah. And so I had a responsibility to share that. Our stories were not meant to die with us. Let me say that one more time. Our stories were not meant to die with us. See, I'm a millennial, right? I'm in the millennial generation, the social media a little bit. We didn't start with social media, but it's become a part of our life. Well, Gen Z and what they're seeing is, and these companies are understanding is, they connect to brands, to people with stories that align with theirs. So I challenge my father every time we talk. I want to hear a story. Tell me more about your story. Because it's in his story that I get to understand more about who I am. See, his generation didn't come from stories. They kept it. It was personal, right? What they went through was personal. I love my father. I can put him on the spot. It's all good. And so I would challenge all of you. Because there's something about your story that the next generation needs. As this world is changing and shifting, whether it was the civil rights movement, where were you? What happened? Some parts of the story that my dad tells me is uncomfortable for him, but it's necessary. Share your stories. That make sense? Bill, interrupt me at any time. I can keep going. So that's why. Why people ask me, why did you write this book? I didn't want to. It was a mission. It was a responsibility. Number 2, why this guy?
Why this guy?
If Bill, and you know me, we speak very candidly, so I appreciate that. And so if you guys, if you allow me to just be me here, I know I've got a suit on and all this stuff, but let me just be me for a second. I knew the research that said 95% of books were written by individuals from the white community. Less than 5% were written by African-American males. I knew that. So I've never written a book, and now I say I'm about progress and opportunity, and I'm going to choose to continue with that statistic. Why Bill? I received a ton of criticism, questions. Well, don't you know they always twist our history? Can I just talk candidly to you? I know I don't want to make you too uncomfortable, but I want to be honest. Because there's a sense of mission and there's a reason why, and I want that to live here and to be carried forward here. I heard these things. But one, it was relationship. If I never had that relationship with a leader, this would have never happened. So long before he came in the picture, it was a relationship. You never know why. You never know the power and the reason for the relationships and the connections that you were meant to have. So when you're just in the grocery store and somebody comes across or you feel inclined to drive to a different side of town or have a conversation or extend your hand or listen, you never know the connection points and where that is going. I had no clue I developed a friendship with this guy. I mean, we've got a lot in common, as you can see. Listen to the same music, you know.
Yeah.
But why Bill? But as I got to know Bill in the conversations, let me pause for a second. I'm gonna let you answer that. Why Bill? Yeah.
For me, having written before and having sensed immediately, an incredible personal story. For me, in working with Tim, the mission was very simple: to tell the story as Tim wanted it told, because it's his life and he experienced it. Tell the story in all its fullness. Get it out. So we would sit at Starbucks at 6 in the morning or even 5:30, and he would have drafted material, or we would have a little recording device, and I would say, just talk. And Tim would say, okay, we've done chapter 2. Do we do chapter 3 now? And I would say, just talk and go where the energy leads you. It's your story in all its fullness. That was my reason for participating, to tell your story. Period.
And you helped tremendously. There's so much more I didn't know that he did know. There's a perspective that I didn't have that he had. And he challenged me, and I'm thankful and I'm grateful for it. I know I don't have time is not necessarily on our side, and so I want to keep things moving. So I'll skip through the FAQs. And I want to get straight to, Bill, if I can just share just a little bit of the story, how we got here, and then we can go through a few of the passages that we talked through, the passages in the book, and we can talk through just what was happening, why we selected those passages, and we can wrap up from there. Does that work? So a little bit quickly about my story and getting here. I was born in California. My father was in the Marines, and that's really where the foundation started, right? I would see this guy wake up early in the morning, consistently. There are two things that he had always: his Bible and his jump rope, right? He kept that Bible with him everywhere, and he kept that jump rope. He was in tremendous shape, disciplined, worked out, and he always held on. While he didn't grow up in a house of faith, he found this. He found faith, and he held on to it. And it was he lived it, he breathed it, it was everything for him. So he would challenge us, right? I'll say this, it wasn't like the way these kids are growing up. They've got options and choices. What would you like to eat? What do you want to watch today? Where do you want to go to school? You know, we didn't have those kind of choices. But it was the discipline that I needed nonetheless. So we go from California to Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma. My parents go to Bible College, Rhema Bible College, or Roberts University. If any of you have heard of it, they were determined to be in the ministry and be pastors. So here we are, me and my siblings. I've got 4 siblings, or 4 of us total, an older brother, older sister, and a younger sister. And we started playing sports. So as we moved around a ton, I'll say a good amount, very unstable housing and environments, the one thing we had and my father did was he kept us together. We had family. We hung out all the time. We were always together. Then I started playing sports. Soccer. Was any soccer players in the house? No? Former soccer players? Okay, all right. Soccer was actually my first love. I loved soccer. I knew nothing about football. The soccer coach recommended and advised my father, hey, you should let this kid play football. To which he said, no. Parents, can I give you a pro tip? If you want your kids to do something, suggest the opposite of what you want them to do, because they tend to do the opposite. The more he said no, the more I was intrigued. Well, I finally got on the football field. It worked out. I loved it. I fell in love with it, and we hopefully something good came out of it. So I'm growing up, Tulsa, Oklahoma. We end up moving to Maryland, Prince George County, Maryland. And that's really where this football, these dreams kind of took off, right? So I went to 4 different high schools between PG County, DeMatha, and then I finally ended at Episcopal, right? I knew I wanted to play professional football. As I mentioned in the video, in the 4th grade, I told my mother I was going to play professional football. I had absolutely no clue what that meant or the obstacles that would lie and that were waiting for me. Here's really where my life changed personally. So going into my senior year of high school at Episcopal, I break my foot. Well, if any of you know collegiate sports and professional sports, in order to go to the pros, you have to first go to what? College. For me, in order to go to college, I needed to receive a scholarship. Well, I didn't have any scholarships. And it's hard to receive a scholarship when you're not playing sports. So here I was with a dilemma. I was just told I was going to miss my entire senior season. I had no scholarships. I've been working my whole life since 4th grade for this. Needless to say, I'm devastated. Tears flooded my eyes. Keep pointing to his guy. I'm looking for, some sort of comfort from my father. I'm crying. I feel like I let my family down. And here was the pep talk he gave me. Son, you've got everything that you need inside of you. You'll get through this. It'll work out. Thanks, Dad. My foot is still broken. But what he was putting on the inside of me was a sense of, I've put a trust in God, I put a resolve, and I put a work ethic on the inside of you. You have what it takes to get through this, and you will get through this. And it was a mindset that carried me through the University of Richmond, where I had no other college scholarships but the University of Richmond, and through my time in the NFL. It was a mindset that led me all the way up to this point of where we get to with this book, to where I'm now faced with the biggest challenge of my life when I had worked my whole life, overcome all the odds to get to a point where now I'm at a life-changing contract moment, and now it's all gone. And now I'm sitting there thinking, what now? It was those words that he told me when I was an 18, 17-year-old kid that started to come back. So we write this book about that dream. And why the title, we talked about, and we can get a little bit now into some of the book and some of the pieces about the story, the journey, and some of the connecting points from the time I was young to where we are now. When we sat down, we said, well, why do we want to write this book, right? I had experienced, and I was meeting people who, again, were experiencing those 5 major life issues. We talked about, in your line of work, people are experiencing change, transition, loss. We were concerned about how people are handling the resiliency of the next generation and even our current generation. How are they handling the traumas? When they're told no, what do I do? Young kids were coming to me, well, what happens if the coach tells me I'm not good enough? Or I get fired from that job? Or I don't get the sales pitch? What happens? Do I turn to destructive behavior? I had gone through all of that. And how do we help? How do we share a story that provides some tools to deal and get through those most difficult moments? Maybe you could talk a little bit about what.
Sure, and I think this is important to say that whenever one person's story is being told, it's very important to put it in context. I mean, an initial concern I had, and again, every concern I had or Tim had was put on the table, which in a way is the message of the book, after all. It's about connection. But my concern was that readers understand that this is a book for all of us. I was concerned. I wasn't worried, but I was concerned that someone would read this book and say, oh, well, here's an NFL player, who has access to so much. And certainly that expedited his recovery. But the point is that recovery is a spiritual journey. It is a journey of faith, regardless what sort of recovery we are describing. And I want to add, and be sure to add, as you saw in the video, perhaps the freakish part of this was Tim was injured without being touched by an opposing player. You know, it in a sense was a freakish injury, but an injury nonetheless. And as a minister, a priest of the church, my concern was, how can we tell the story in a way that people don't pigeonhole it as the story of a gifted athlete, but that people really see that this is about the potential for God's healing presence in all of our lives. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm quite answering your question, but it was about teasing out the dream that you had so that people could see that all of us can dream, and our dreams take hits. And yes, by God's grace, we can come back, and often in ways we never imagined.
Absolutely. So, friend, the original title of the book was Never Give Up, right? So this is something, I've kept this on. My son asked me the other day, why do you still have this? It's something that I created during those times. But I'm talking to a friend of mine, and she's talking about all the challenges that are going in her life. And she asked me a question that was really, when Bill talks about how do we relate and connect with so many, she said, how do you know what's worth fighting for? Maybe some of you have wrestled with that at some point in your life. I know I have, and I still do. How do we know? We have a finite amount of time. We have a finite amount of energy. How do we know those things in our life that are worth fighting for? And what was it about your dream that was worth fighting for? And when she told me that, I called Bill. I sent Bill a text immediately, and I said, that is it. There was a dream. We all have dreams. We all have things. And there's some things that we got to know, the old saying, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. But there are those things that are worth fighting for. And so that's where this book. Can we turn to the book a little bit, since we actually came here about the book? Okay. Can I read a few? And who, for the sake of time, I want to make sure is there a clock keeper or something on the wall? Okay, perfect. So I know we're coming up on time, and I want to. Okay. So this is, just to provide a little bit of context. This was, I make it back to the NFL. I'm out for 4 years, multiple surgeries. Let's call it a few dollars spent in trying to get back, and to no avail. But it finally works. I'm back. Played 2 years with the Saints, and then I go to the 49ers, which is my childhood favorite team. All to get released and cut unexpectedly. So here we go again. Maybe I could pick up where I left off. At times, we all want to go back to an old relationship to see if there's still a spark, still a connection. If we are honest, rarely do any flickers remain. When something has gone, it's over. Rarely does anything worthwhile come out of trying to rekindle. What was life then is not now. It is not possible or desirable to go there. The future cannot be a revival of the past. Yet I made a decision looking back instead of considering what would be the best decision going forward. So Sean Payton's sitting I'm sitting in the office of Sean Payton, the head coach of New Orleans Saints at the time. At the end of the season, he says, Tim, you've had it's phenomenal, the comeback that you made. We'd love for you to do another year here. But he suggested that I change my position to fullback. So that triggered this emotional response on the inside where all growing up I was told I wasn't good enough, I wasn't fast enough to be a running back, a fullback. And so sometimes we can hear things out of the trauma in our lives if we're not careful. And instead of hearing the wisdom in what he was saying, I kicked into that natural fight or flight response, and I said, you know what, I'm going to prove him wrong. And I made a decision to go to San Francisco, not out of what was the best decision for me and my family moving forward, but maybe Kyle Shanahan, who was the offensive coordinator with the at the time Redskins, was now with the 49ers, maybe I could go back to someone who saw me and esteemed me in a certain way. Not where I was and what was best for me and my family. Now, maybe I can go back. One of those lessons that we talked about, and I learned here, I can't make decisions based on pride. It doesn't work out often.
May I say, may I
Absolutely.
add? And I think this is relevant to what you're saying. In the course of working on the book, I had the opportunity to interview a few people close to you, and one of the people I had the delightful opportunity to interview was Sean Payton, now the coach of the Denver Broncos. And I mean, I didn't know what to think interviewing an NFL coach and all of that. It was an hour on the phone. It was utterly delightful. And I was struck yet again by the bond that can form among players and coaches. So I was having a great time, and finally I said, why do you want to talk to somebody you don't know about somebody that hasn't played for you in over 5 years? And I remember to this day exactly what he said. He said, when they play for me, they become family. And if a family member wants me to meet a friend, I'm happy to do it. That's what he said. So the bond, and I want to believe, I dare to believe, that those coaches and those players who understand the goodness that can form in that kind of bond are the ones that are more successful on and off the field. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I want to believe that. And so you taught me about what you just read from the book, about what it means to go forward, And yes, I mean, the book ends with the description of getting cut by the 49ers, and Ricky and your family had gotten you a 49ers jersey and in anticipation. And yet you had to come to grips with what you have just articulated, that you had to go forward. So am I on target?
You are 100% on forward. Recovery means moving forward. I had to learn my body. I was different. I couldn't make decisions and even refer and identify to myself to who I was. I had to understand and come to grips with who am I now and where am I going. And the more I tried to look back and go forward, we all know, or many of you know how that works. But as soon as I took inventory of who am I, where am I now, right, and making decisions moving forward. Before I read the next one, Sir Lennox, my oldest son is Sir Lennox. His name is Sir Lennox. Can you come up here? This is improv. He has no clue he's doing this. Can you come up here for a second? Before I read this next, can you hold that up, buddy? So this is after. Can you hold it up like this so they can see it? The back of it. So enthused to be up here. Okay. So I move out there. I double down. I just bought a home here, not too far on York Road, and I'm off to San Francisco. Now, this was my childhood favorite team, so in a lot of ways, it was a dream come true. I mean, I had 49ers pictures. I had every 49ers player on my wall, and I would cut their faces off, and I would put my face on every single one of the players. No, that's a true story. I love the 49ers that much, and I saw myself in the 49ers jersey one day. And so in a lot of ways, this was a dream come true. And so I get home after practice, the final cuts, and unexpectedly, Kyle Shanahan's calling me in his office, and he says, hey, we got to go in a different direction. I know what I told you, it's off season, but, hey, it's business, right? Any of you ever heard that? Hey, it's just business. It's not personal. So I get home, and my wife, Ricky, she had planned, bless her heart, to have a celebration, right? So she had ordered this jersey that they were going to meet me. My oldest son was going to meet me with this jersey on, right? great intentions. She didn't know I was about to be cut and released. So she hid the jersey, right? She's sensitive to that. She hid the jersey. Well, Sir Lennox found it, and he had it on. And I walked into the room after I just got cut, and I see my son with his jersey on. I broke down. I'll read a quick big, and I know for the sake of time, do I have time to read that section? I asked Lennox to step out of the room. I get myself together. After what seemed like hours, I looked over the personalized jersey. But this time, a different thought came to mind. I would not throw it away, nor would I be embarrassed by it. Maybe the jersey did not have to represent disappointment. Maybe it could serve as a reminder of what it took to go where I had gone, to achieve what I had achieved. The lessons learned, the sacrifice, the price you must pay to pursue your dreams. Maybe these realizations could serve as a new definition of recovery. Recovery ultimately does not mean trying to return to a past moment in time, but creating new moments. The image that drove me as a kid, seeing my name on the back of a professional jersey, would now serve a different purpose. In a new way, a way I had never imagined before. "Are you okay?" Rakia asked as she walked into the room. My answer came quickly. "No, not right now, but I believe I will be." "Thank you for buying this jersey. It may have served a different purpose than you had intended, but it was exactly what I needed." Just as I did 3 years prior when I first received the call from New Orleans, I grabbed Sir Lennox and I gave him a big hug. I put the jersey on him, I stepped back, and I smiled. "Promise me you'll never give up on yourself, okay?" He extended his pinky, locked it with mine, and he sealed it with a kiss. "I promise, Daddy. You promise me too, okay?" I was proud to be affirmative. I promise, Sir Lennox. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. We're at the end of our time, but we're going to be here for conversation. And so delighted that all of you came out. And of course, Tim lives right here in Richmond and is a dear friend, and we hope for other opportunities in other sorts of ways. But for now, thank you for being here.